All right, let's dive into this explainer because today we're going to completely reframe something you do literally every single night. For the longest time, we've kind of just written off dreaming as this random, passive biological glitch, right? Like maybe it's just the brain's weird way of filing away the day's memories. But actually, scratch that. Today, we're looking at dreaming as a highly advanced piece of evolutionary technology. We are literally going to reverse engineer your dreams. I really want you to just ponder this strange reality for a second. Why on earth do we spend roughly 6 whole years of our average lifespan completely paralyzed and hallucinating vividly in our sleep? I mean, think about it from a pure survival standpoint. Lying unconscious and totally unresponsive for hours every single day, that is incredibly dangerous. So you got to ask yourself, what immense biological purpose could possibly justify taking that massive of a risk? Well, let's start with this fascinating origin story. If we go back, say, roughly 1 million years, our ancestors, much like other primates, actually slept up in trees. And it was this fragmented, half-alert kind of sleep because, if you fell into a really deep sleep, you might literally fall out of the tree, or worse, get eaten. But everything changed with the discovery of fire. Once Homo erectus figured out how to maintain a controlled fire, the ground suddenly became safe. Predators stayed away from the flames. So for the very first time in human evolutionary history, a human body could lie on the ground and completely, totally relax. And it was that ground-level safety that unlocked deep REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which gave birth to vivid, immersive dreaming. So in a way, fire essentially built the bridge to our very first altered states of consciousness. How wild is that? So that brings us to Act 1, Nature's Virtual Reality Simulator. Now, if you've ever woken up in a cold sweat from a nightmare, you've probably wondered why your brain insists on torturing itself. Well, to explain why dreams can be so unbelievably stressful, cognitive neuroscientist Antti Revonsuo came up with what's called the threat simulation theory. And this theory suggests that our ancient ancestors basically used dreams as a built-in biological virtual reality. Way, way before computers were ever a thing, our brains constructed this internal VR environment to repeatedly simulate threatening, survival-critical events. We're talking things like being chased by a predator or escaping a natural disaster. And when you think about why this system evolved, it makes perfect sense. Practicing survival skills in reality, that's a super high-risk game that could literally get you killed. But practicing in the VR of your dreams, that gives you zero risk rehearsal. Your dream tiger obviously can't actually bite you. You're behaviorally isolated, completely safe in your bed, but your brain is firing up the exact same neural pathways it would use out in the real world. So by practicing threat avoidance at night, you're actually enhancing your waking brain's ability to spot and escape danger the very next day. It's like a nightly training camp. But of course, human survival isn't just about dodging predators, right? It's also about navigating each other. And that leads us to the social simulation theory, which says we use this exact same VR space to rehearse crucial social interactions. In fact, our dreams exhibit this massive sociality bias. Basically, that means our dreams are packed with way more social interactions than our waking lives usually are. It provides this incredibly safe space to practice complex social perception. You can rehearse arguments, figure out tricky negotiations, and reinforce bonding with your community. And these nighttime rehearsals actually strengthen the pro-social behaviors that keep our human networks strong when we're awake. Moving right along to Act 2, the cognitive disruptor. So in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning, there's this computational dilemma called overfitting. Basically, if you feed an AI too much of the exact same repetitive data, it gets stuck in a rut. It becomes so rigidly tuned to that one specific dataset that it completely loses its ability to generalize or handle anything new. And according to researcher Eric Hole's overfitted brain hypothesis, the human brain faces that exact same danger. Think about it. Our modern waking lives are incredibly repetitive. We have the same morning commute. We fill out the same spreadsheets. We do the same daily routines over and over. If we aren't careful, our brains can actually become overfitted to the daily grind. But here is the crucial point. Your brain actually has a built-in defense mechanism against this monotony. Hallel proposes that dreams act as something called simulated annealing. Basically, your brain actively injects hallucinogenic, category-breaking, totally bizarre noise into your mind every single night. By throwing you into these strange, out-of-distribution experiences, like suddenly realizing you're giving a presentation while floating in zero gravity, your brain is purposefully disrupting your rigid daily patterns. It's shaking things up to keep your cognition generalized, flexible, and totally ready for the unexpected. And you know what? You've actually probably experienced this yourself. It's often called the Tetris effect. Let's say you overtrain on a novel, repetitive task, like playing Tetris for 6 hours straight. Your visual and motor networks become highly overfitted to those little falling blocks. Your brain detects this unhealthy rigidity, so when you finally go to sleep, it triggers these corrupted, highly associative, totally bizarre dream variations of the game. It actively breaks that rigid pattern so that your next day performance and your mental flexibility actually improve. It's a real game changer. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Act 3, under the hood of REM sleep. Let's take a look at the visual signatures of something called PGO waves. These little electrical spikes are essentially the biological projectors of the sleeping mind. They're the actual physical mechanism firing up that VR simulation we've been talking about. Now, PGO stands for pontogeniculo-occipital waves, and here is exactly how this biological projector works. These electrical signals start as dense spikes right at the base of your brain, down in the brainstem, specifically a region called the pons. From there, they travel up into the visual center of your thalamus, and they terminate directly in your primary visual cortex right at the back of your head. Now, because you're asleep and your brain is totally isolated from the outside world, it doesn't know any better. It interprets these internal electrical sparks as genuine, real-time visual data. And that is exactly why the hallucinatory visual frame of your dreams feels so incredibly, undeniably real. But wait, there is a massive risk here. If your visual cortex genuinely thinks it's fighting a simulated tiger, what's stopping you from literally jumping up and running out of your bedroom? Well, nature is incredibly clever. A specific cluster of neurons in your brainstem, called the gigantocellular reticular nucleus, drives a descending chemical pathway that actively paralyzes your muscles. This state is known as atonia. It is literally a biological safety switch. It allows you to run, fight, and fly in your mind without ever moving a single inch in the real world, or, accidentally punching your nightstand. And that brings us to our final section, Act 4, Overnight Emotional Therapy. To really understand this, we need to look at a massive chemical difference between being awake and dreaming. When you experience something stressful or traumatic while you're awake, your brain is flooded with stress hormones, specifically really high levels of noradrenaline. Basically, it's the chemistry of panic. But REM sleep offers a completely unique biological state. The second you enter REM sleep, the concentration of that noradrenaline drops dramatically, almost down to zero. So what happens is your dreaming brain can reactivate that same painful memory, but it does it in a neurochemical environment that is entirely stripped of that stress chemistry. And this creates what is honestly an elegant overnight therapy process. Step 1, your brain reactivates the painful or highly emotional memory. Step 2, it processes that memory while actively suppressing all those panic chemicals. And finally, Step 3, it re-encodes the memory back into your long-term storage, but it has successfully decoupled the factual information of what happened from the visceral, painful, emotional charge you felt when it actually occurred. This actually leads to a brilliant insight from sleep research. To quote the literature directly, the brain therefore preserves a memory of an emotional event, but which itself is no longer emotional. This mechanism is absolutely crucial. It ensures that you retain the vital survival lessons of yesterday's hard times without having to carry the crippling anxiety of them into tomorrow. It is, quite literally, free overnight therapy. Now, to tie this all back to our daily waking lives, Eric Hole proposes this truly fascinating idea about human culture. He suggests that our deep obsession with reading fiction, watching movies, and playing video games is actually our way of seeking out artificial dreams. Because we are so deeply terrified of cognitive rigidity, we instinctively consume fiction to externally inject noise and novelty into our brains. It's our way of preventing our minds from stagnating while we're wide awake. It's like we're hacking our own need for simulated annealing. It's just a brilliant perspective on human nature, and it really leaves us to wonder about the future. Both our biology and our culture are desperately trying to keep our minds flexible and emotionally balanced through the power of simulation. We absolutely rely on this nightly dose of noise, therapy, and VR practice. Which begs the ultimate question. In a modern world where we are increasingly sleep-deprived and constantly stressed, what happens to human cognition and our collective sanity if we just stop paying attention to our dreams? Something to think about tonight. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.